Imagine a version of you that cannot be broken. Someone lies to your face, and you feel it, but it does not shatter you. Someone you trusted disappears without explanation, and you grieve, but you do not collapse. Someone smiles at you while quietly working against you behind your back, and when you finally discover it, something in you stays standing. Not because you stopped feeling, because you stopped depending on their honesty to know who you are. Now, open your eyes and look at the life most people actually live. How many nights have you replayed the exact moment you realized someone lied to you? How many conversations have you rehearsed in the shower, in the car, in the dark, trying to say the thing that would finally make them understand what they did? How many people who betrayed you years ago are still, somehow, renting space in your mind, rent-free, while they sleep peacefully tonight without a single thought of you? How much of your ability to trust again has quietly been buried in the wreckage of one person who was never worth the cost? This is the wound almost no one talks about honestly. Not heartbreak, not failure, betrayal. The moment someone you opened your guard for used that opening against you, and the tragedy is never only what they did. The tragedy is what you built afterward, brick by brick, around your own heart, believing the wall would protect you, never noticing it was slowly becoming your prison. Today that changes. Today you will learn what the Stoics understood 2,000 years before modern psychology gave it a name, that the person who betrayed you can only wound you once. Everything after that first wound is self-inflicted, repeated, sharpened by your own mind. By the end of this video, you will understand why forgiveness was never about them, why trust was never meant to be given blindly, and why the calmest people you have ever met are not the ones who were never betrayed. They are the ones who stopped letting betrayal write the rest of their story. Stay until the end, because the final truth in this video is the one that separates people who survive betrayal from people who are finally free of it. Part 1. The second wound. There is a wound almost nobody names correctly. The first wound is the betrayal itself, the lie, the affair, the stolen money, the friend who spoke about you the moment you left the room. That wound is real. It deserves grief, but most people never stop bleeding from the first wound. They bleed from the second one, the one they create themselves, every single day, by reliving the first. You replay the conversation. You imagine what you should have said. You search their name at midnight. You build entire arguments in your head against someone who is not even thinking about you. This is the second wound, and here is the truth almost no one wants to hear. The second wound is optional. The first one was not. Picture a river that has been diverted by a fallen tree. The water does not stop moving. It does not sit in place and drown in the same spot forever. It bends. It finds a new direction. It carves a different path through the earth, and eventually, the river is flowing again, wider and stronger than before, as though the obstacle never happened. A river that refuses to bend does not become powerful. It becomes a swamp. Most people, after betrayal, become the swamp. Not because they are weak, but because no one ever taught them that pain is meant to move, not to pool. Marcus Aurelius, writing to no one but himself, in the middle of a war he never wanted to fight, understood something about this long before he ever used the word betrayal. He reminded himself that it is not events that disturb people, but the judgments they carry about those events. The lie itself lasted seconds. The judgment about the lie can last a lifetime if you let it. Think about the last person who betrayed you. The event is already over. It ended the moment it happened. What continues is not the betrayal. What continues is you, feeding it, watering it, keeping it alive long after the person who caused it has moved on to a life that no longer includes you. Here is what this looks like in an ordinary day. You are making coffee, thinking about nothing in particular, and suddenly their face appears in your mind. Not because anything reminded you of them, because the wound has never finished healing, so it keeps reopening itself in silence, uninvited, at the worst possible moments, in meetings, in the shower, right before sleep, stealing peace you were never given the choice to protect. not because they are still hurting you, but because you never let the wound close. Part 2. Why the liar sleeps better than you. Here is the part almost nobody says out loud, because it feels unfair, and it is unfair. The person who betrayed you is, in most cases, sleeping fine. They are not lying awake replaying the moment they lied to you. They are not composing speeches in their head about what they did. In many cases, they have already rewritten the story so completely in their own mind that they believe they did nothing wrong at all. Ask yourself honestly, do you truly believe they are suffering as much as you are, right now, tonight? If the answer is no, then you already understand the trap you are in. You are the one still paying, in sleepless nights and clenched jaws and unexplained anger at people who did nothing to you, for a debt the original debtor has already forgotten they owe. But the truth is, this is not a flaw in the universe. It is not proof that justice does not exist. It is proof of something the Stoics repeated in 100 different ways across 400 years. Other people's peace was never your responsibility, and your peace was never supposed to depend on their guilt. Think of a mirror hanging on a wall in an empty room. It reflects whatever stands in front of it: sunlight, shadow, a stranger's face, an empty hallway. The mirror does not choose what it reflects. It has no opinion about what passes before it. It simply shows what is there, without becoming what is there. A person who has mastered themselves learns to hold other people's behavior the way a mirror holds a reflection: present, visible, understood, but never absorbed into the glass itself. You do not have to become bitter because someone else lied. You do not have to become suspicious of everyone because one person deceived you. You do not have to become cold because someone else was cruel. The mirror does not turn to smoke because a shadow passed across it. Carl Jung wrote something that most people quote without ever applying it to their own lives. He said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Translate that into the language of betrayal. Until you consciously decide what this experience means, your wound will decide for you, quietly, in the background, shaping who you trust, who you love, and how you show up in every relationship that comes after. And you will call it just who I am now, never realizing it was never your true nature. It was an old wound, still driving. Here is what this looks like in real life. Someone new enters your life, kind, consistent, honest, and instead of feeling safe, you feel suspicious. You test them. You wait for the betrayal you are certain is coming, because your last experience taught your nervous system that closeness always ends in deception. You are not protecting yourself from them. You are punishing them for something someone else did, not because they lied to you, but because you never finished grieving the lie that came before them. Part 3. The false comfort of revenge. Somewhere in the aftermath of betrayal, almost everyone fantasizes about the same thing. The moment where the truth comes out, where the betrayer finally understands what they did, where they feel even a fraction of what you felt. You imagine their regret. You imagine them finally seeing your worth, too late, exactly when it no longer matters. It feels good to imagine. It feels like justice. But ask yourself something uncomfortable. How many times have you actually gotten that moment? And on the rare occasion you did get an apology, did it actually heal anything? Or did the wound simply find a new place to hide? The truth is, revenge, even imagined revenge, keeps you tied to the person who hurt you more tightly than forgiveness ever could. Every fantasy of them suffering is another rope wrapped around your own wrists, because you cannot imagine their punishment without first summoning their memory, and you cannot summon their memory without reopening the door you are trying so hard to close. Picture a man dragging a heavy stone behind him everywhere he goes, insisting he is punishing someone else by carrying it. The person he is angry at does not feel the weight. They are miles away, unaware, unaffected. Only his own shoulders bend under the load, his own strength that is spent, his own days that grow shorter, carrying something that was never his to carry in the first place. Anger held without release does not punish the guilty. It exhausts the innocent. Seneca, who understood anger more intimately than almost any philosopher in history, wrote that no one has ever paid a higher price for anything than the price paid for holding on to anger. He did not mean it poetically. He meant it literally. The years you spend rehearsing what they did to you are years. They do not come back. They are not refunded once you finally let go. They are simply gone, spent on a debt that was never yours to collect in the first place. Here is what this looks like on an ordinary Tuesday. You see their name appear on your phone. Years later, an accidental notification, a mutual friend's photo, a mention in passing, and your entire body reacts as though it just happened. Your chest tightens. Your jaw clenches. For the rest of the day, a person who is not even in the room controls your mood, your patience with your children, your tone with your partner, your focus at work. Not because they still have power over you, but because you never took your power back. Part 4. What trust was always supposed to be. Here is where most people get betrayal wrong from the very beginning, long before it ever happens. They believe trust is something you give completely, all at once, to anyone who says the right words or shows up consistently for a few months. Then when that person eventually shows you who they really are, the collapse feels catastrophic, because the entire structure of the relationship was resting on a single, untested pillar. But the truth is, trust was never supposed to be a single decision made once. It was always supposed to be a pattern, observed slowly, over time, through actions rather than promises. Think of a bridge built across a canyon. No engineer trusts a bridge because the architect gave a beautiful speech about how strong it will be. The bridge earns trust through testing. Weight added gradually, stress measured, weaknesses identified and reinforced, before a single car ever crosses it. A person who gives full trust on the first promise is not being generous. They are driving across a bridge that has never been tested, at full speed, in the dark. This is not cynicism. This is wisdom. The Stoics were not cold toward other people. They simply refused to hand their peace to people who had not yet proven they deserved to hold it. Epictetus taught something that sounds harsh until you understand it fully. He said that some things are within our control, and some things are not. And the beginning of wisdom is knowing the difference. Whether another person is honest was never within your control. What was always within your control was how carefully you allowed them access to your heart before they had proven anything at all. Here is what this looks like practically. A new person enters your life, charming, attentive, saying all the right things within the first few weeks. Instead of slowing down, you hand them everything immediately, your secrets, your schedule, your emotional safety, because the loneliness inside you wanted so badly for this to be the one who finally stays. When they eventually reveal who they truly are, the wound feels unbearable, not only because of what they did, but because of how much you handed them before they had earned the right to hold it. Not because trust was wrong to give, but because it was given before it was earned. Part 5. The person who taught you who not to become. There is a strange kind of freedom waiting on the other side of a question almost no one asks after betrayal. Not, why did they do this to me? But what is this teaching me about the person I refuse to become? This question feels impossible in the beginning. In the raw days after discovering a betrayal, the last thing anyone wants is a lesson. They want the pain to stop. They want the person to suffer. They want to rewind time and never have opened the door in the first place. All of that is human, and none of it is shameful. But the truth is, time will pass whether you extract meaning from this or not. The only question is whether you come out of it wiser or simply older. Picture a sculptor standing before a block of marble, striking it with a hammer and chisel. From the outside, it looks like destruction, chips falling away, pieces breaking off, the block growing smaller with every strike. But the sculptor is not destroying the marble. He is revealing what was always inside it, by removing everything that was never supposed to remain. Betrayal, as brutal as it feels in the moment, often strikes away illusions you were carrying, about a person, about a relationship, about what you were willing to accept simply to avoid being alone. Viktor Frankl, who survived experiences most people cannot imagine, wrote that everything can be taken from a person but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, the ability to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. He did not discover this in comfort. He discovered it in a concentration camp, watching everything else be stripped away, and realizing that the one thing that could never be taken was the meaning he chose to build from what remained. Betrayal cannot take your integrity unless you hand it over. It can take your trust in one person. It cannot take your capacity to trust wisely again. It can take a relationship. It cannot take your worth, unless you decide their opinion of you was more accurate than your own. Here is what this looks like in a real life. A woman discovers her partner has been unfaithful for over a year, hidden behind careful lies. In the wreckage, she has two paths. One path leads to becoming exactly what hurt her, guarded permanently, incapable of vulnerability, punishing every future partner for a crime they did not commit. The other path leads to becoming someone who learned, precisely, what she will never again accept, and who chooses honesty for herself even more fiercely because she now knows exactly what its absence costs. Not because the betrayal was good, but because what she built afterward was hers to choose. Part 6. The silence that speaks louder than your defense. After betrayal, there is often a desperate urge to explain, to correct the record, to make sure everyone understands what really happened and who was truly at fault. You want witnesses. You want the world to see the truth exactly as you saw it. But ask yourself, how many times has explaining actually changed anything? How many times has convincing someone of your version of events brought back a single hour of peace? The truth is, some situations do not need your defense. They need your silence, not because you have nothing to say, but because you have finally understood that dignity does not need an audience to be real. Picture a mountain standing beneath a sky filled with circling vultures, each one waiting, watching, hoping for something to fall. The mountain does not respond to the vultures. It does not shift its shape to prove it is not weak, does not perform strength for creatures that will move on regardless of what it does. It simply remains what it has always been, indifferent to the noise circling above it, because its stability was never dependent on anyone else's opinion of it. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, again and again, that the best revenge is to not become like the person who wronged you. Not silence as suppression, silence as refusal, a refusal to let someone else's dishonesty pull you into behavior that betrays your own character. Here is what this looks like at a family dinner, months after the betrayal became public. Someone brings it up, carefully, testing to see if you will finally give them the reaction they are waiting for. The outburst, the tears, the desperate defense. You feel the pull to explain everything, to relive every detail one more time for an audience that has already made up its mind. And then, for the first time, you simply say, "That's in the past," and change the subject, and something inside you settles that has not settled in months. Not silence, because you are hiding. Silence, because you no longer need permission to be believed. Part 7. Why forgiveness was never for them. There is a sentence that stops most people from ever healing. I will forgive them when they deserve it. It sounds like justice. It feels like strength. And it is, quietly, one of the most effective ways to remain a prisoner for the rest of your life, because you have just handed a person who already hurt you once the power to decide when your suffering ends. But the truth is, forgiveness was never a gift you give to the person who betrayed you. It was always a gift you give to the version of yourself who is exhausted from carrying them. Think about a hand clenched tightly around a burning coal, held there for years, waiting for the person who threw it to apologize before letting go. The coal does not cool because you are angry at who threw it. It only cools when the hand finally opens. The person who threw it may never even know the hand was burning. They are somewhere else entirely, living a life that has nothing to do with your fist, your pain, your years spent waiting for them to say sorry. Epictetus taught that we are disturbed not by what happened, but by our continued opinion about what happened. Forgiveness, in the Stoic sense, is not saying what they did was acceptable. It is releasing the belief that your peace requires their accountability. It never did. It never will. Here is what this looks like in a quiet, ordinary moment. Years after the betrayal, you find yourself thinking of the person, and instead of the old surge of anger, there is simply nothing. Not because you forgot, not because it did not matter, but because you finally stopped needing them to understand what they did in order for you to be free of it. Not forgiveness because they earned it. Forgiveness because you finally refuse to keep paying for something they never intend to repay. Part 8. The armor that nobody can find. Here is what almost no one tells you about people who seem impossible to hurt. It is not that nothing bad has ever happened to them. It is not that no one has ever lied to them, betrayed them, deceived them, or broken their trust in ways that should have destroyed them. It is that somewhere along the way, they stopped keeping their peace in a place other people could reach. Ask yourself where your peace currently lives. Is it in your bank account, safe until someone takes it? Is it in your reputation, safe until someone lies about you? Is it in a person's loyalty, safe until they decide to leave? If your peace lives in anything outside your own character, it was never truly yours. It was on loan, and loans can always be called in without warning. Picture a lighthouse standing on a cliff during the worst storm of the year. Waves crash against the rocks below with enough force to break stone. Rain falls sideways, driven by wind that could knock a grown man off his feet. And yet the light at the top of the tower does not flicker, does not dim, does not ask the storm for permission to keep shining. It was built to withstand exactly this. Its strength was never dependent on calm weather. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who your betrayer made you, not who your wound trained you to be, who you actually are, underneath the scar tissue, once you finally stop letting the injury make every decision for you. The armor that nobody can find is not indifference. It is not pretending nothing hurts. It is something quieter and far more powerful. The decision that your worth, your peace, and your identity are no longer stored in any place another human being can reach, touch, or take. Here is what this looks like in practice. Someone who betrayed you years ago sends a message, out of nowhere, testing the waters, curious whether the door is still open. The old version of you would have felt your entire week collapse around that message. The new version reads it, feels a brief flicker of something old and familiar, and simply closes the phone, because the version of you that needed their validation to feel whole no longer exists. Not because the message did not matter, but because your peace no longer lives where they can reach it. Part 9. The one person you must never betray. There is a final layer to this that most people never reach, because it requires an honesty that is harder than forgiving anyone else. After you have processed the wound, released the anger, refused revenge, and rebuilt your capacity to trust wisely, there remains one more relationship to repair, the one with yourself. Because here is the uncomfortable truth. In the aftermath of betrayal, most people do something they never notice they are doing. They betray themselves, quietly, every single day, by ignoring the signs they saw and chose not to trust, by staying long after their own instincts whispered that something was wrong, by silencing the part of them that already knew the truth because they were too afraid of being right. The truth is, before anyone else betrayed you, there may have been a moment you betrayed yourself first, by refusing to listen to what you already sensed. Picture a compass held by someone determined to walk in a direction they have already decided on, ignoring the needle no matter which way it points. Eventually the compass stops being useful, not because it broke, but because its owner stopped trusting it. Self-betrayal works the same way. Every time you silence your own instincts to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to keep believing in someone who has already shown you who they are, you teach your own inner compass that its readings do not matter. Frankl wrote that between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space lies our power to choose our response, and in our response lies our growth and our freedom. The space he describes is exactly where self-trust is rebuilt, in the pause before you ignore your own instincts again, in the moment you choose to honor what you sense rather than override it to keep someone comfortable. Here is what this looks like moving forward. A new relationship begins, and something feels slightly off in a way you cannot yet articulate. The old you would have dismissed it, apologized for even noticing, buried the feeling to avoid seeming paranoid. The rebuilt you pauses, watches, asks questions, waits for actions to confirm or contradict the feeling, without accusing, without collapsing into old anxiety, simply trusting your own perception enough to take it seriously. Not paranoia, not distrust of everyone, simply, finally, trust restored, to yourself first, before anyone else is ever allowed to hold it again. Part 10. The people who never left, but should have. There is a quieter form of betrayal that almost no one names correctly, because it never looks like betrayal from the outside. It is the person who never lied, never cheated, never stole anything from you, but who slowly, over years, taught you that your feelings were too much, your needs were inconvenient, and your peace was always negotiable whenever it conflicted with theirs. Ask yourself something honest. Have you ever apologized for being upset about something that genuinely hurt you? Have you ever shrunk a real problem down to nothing, just to avoid being called dramatic? Have you ever stayed quiet about something that mattered, because the one time you spoke up, you were made to feel like the problem? The truth is, betrayal does not always arrive as a single dramatic event. Sometimes it arrives slowly, disguised as normal, until one day you look at your own life and do not recognize how small you have made yourself in order to keep the peace with people who were never actually keeping any peace with you. Picture a tree growing beside a wall, forced from its first season to bend sideways to reach the light. Years pass, and the wall is removed, but the tree does not straighten. Its shape has already been decided by an obstacle that no longer exists. Most people carry a version of this. The wall is long gone. The parent, the ex, the friend who conditioned them to apologize for existing, but the bend remains, shaping how they show up in every relationship since, long after the original pressure disappeared. Seneca warned that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, but he also understood that imagination is not always the villain. Sometimes what we suffer from is not imagination at all, but memory, the accumulated weight of 100 small moments where we learned it was safer to disappear than to be fully seen. He did not tell his students to blame the wall forever. He told them to notice the bend and choose, deliberately, painfully, to grow straight again. Here is what this looks like in an ordinary week. Someone asks how you are doing, and the honest answer is exhausted, hurt, overwhelmed. Instead, you say fine, smile, change the subject, because somewhere along the way, you learned that your true answer makes other people uncomfortable, and their comfort was always prioritized over your honesty. You go home and wonder, quietly, why you feel invisible in rooms full of people who claim to love you. Not because you are difficult, but because you were taught, patiently, over years, that your needs were the price of being kept. Part 11. Why the strongest people still get fooled. There is a myth that needs to be destroyed before this journey can be complete. The myth says that intelligent people do not get deceived, that strong people always see betrayal coming, that if you were truly wise, you would have known better than to trust the person who eventually hurt you. This myth is not just false, it is cruel, because it adds a second wound on top of the first, shame, layered directly over grief, convincing you that your pain is proof of your own stupidity rather than proof of someone else's dishonesty. Ask yourself honestly, was the lie you believed actually unreasonable to believe? Or was it simply well told, by someone skilled enough at deception that even careful, intelligent people around you were also fooled? The truth is, being deceived is not evidence of weakness. It is evidence that you were dealing with someone whose skill at dishonesty exceeded your reasonable expectation of decency. That is not your failure, that is theirs. Picture a forger so skilled that even museum experts trained for decades to spot fakes, initially certify the painting as authentic. When the forgery is eventually discovered, does anyone blame the museum for having eyes? Does anyone call the experts foolish for trusting their trained perception? No. The blame belongs entirely to the forger, who built deception skilled enough to survive expert scrutiny. The same logic applies to you. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire filled with advisors whose loyalty he could never fully verify, understood that no amount of wisdom eliminates the risk of being deceived by someone determined to deceive you. He did not measure his own worth by whether he was ever fooled. He measured it by what he did once the deception was revealed. Not who fooled him, but who he chose to become afterward. That was the only measurement that mattered to him. Here is what this looks like in real terms. You spend 2 years with someone who presented themselves as honest, careful, consistent, only to discover it was performance the entire time. In the aftermath, instead of grieving cleanly, you begin interrogating your own judgment. How did I not see this? What is wrong with my perception? Can I ever trust myself again? This interrogation, left unchecked, becomes more damaging than the original betrayal, because now you distrust the one person you actually need to rely on for the rest of your life, yourself. Not proof that you are foolish, proof only that someone worked very hard to make sure you would not see it coming. Part 12. The difference between guarded and free. There is a final trap waiting at the end of every healing journey, one that looks like strength, but is actually just a slower, quieter form of the same prison. It is the decision, made silently after enough pain, to simply stop letting anyone close enough to hurt you again. No more vulnerability, no more full trust. Keep everyone at a careful, permanent distance, and call it wisdom. Ask yourself something uncomfortable. Is that peace, or is that simply a different kind of suffering? One that protects you from betrayal by making sure you never again experience real connection either. The truth is, there is a meaningful difference between being guarded and being free, and most people who have been betrayed spend years mistaking one for the other. Picture a castle built with such thick walls, such narrow windows, such heavily fortified gates that no enemy could ever successfully invade it, and no friend, no ally, no loved one could ever comfortably enter it either. The castle is safe. The castle is also empty. Total safety and total isolation, it turns out, often look identical from the outside and feel identical from within. Frankl, again, offers the clearest answer here, because he built his entire philosophy from the worst circumstances imaginable and still refused to close himself off from meaning, from connection, from love, even after losing almost everyone he had ever loved. He wrote that those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. The why was never safety. The why was always meaning, connection, purpose, things that require, at some point, the courage to open the gate again. True mastery after betrayal is not the permanent, fortified castle. It is the lighthouse from earlier in this video, open, visible, standing exactly where it can be seen and reached, and still unshaken, no matter what storm arrives. The lighthouse does not protect itself by refusing to shine. It protects itself by becoming strong enough that shining no longer puts it at risk. Here is what this looks like, eventually, for someone who has done the real work. A new person enters their life, kind, patient, consistent over time, not just in words. And instead of testing them relentlessly, punishing them for a crime someone else committed, this person slowly, carefully, deliberately opens the gate again. Not blindly, not recklessly, but with eyes open, watching actions, allowing trust to be earned in real time, exactly the way it was always supposed to work in the first place. Not a fortress that nothing can enter, but a home, guarded wisely, that finally lets the right people in. Part 13. The moment the story stops being about them. There is one final shift that separates someone who has survived betrayal from someone who has actually transcended it, and it is smaller than most people expect. It is not a dramatic confrontation. It is not a public vindication. It is not even the moment forgiveness finally arrives. It is the moment you notice, almost by accident, that when you tell the story of what happened to you, you are no longer the person it happened to. You are simply the narrator, describing something that used to hurt. Ask yourself where you are right now, in relation to your own story. When you think about the betrayal, does your chest still tighten the way it once did? Does your voice still shake if you have to explain it out loud? Or has something quietly shifted, so that the facts remain exactly the same, but your relationship to them has changed completely? The truth is, healing was never about the facts changing. The facts never change. What changes is the charge those facts still carry when you touch them. Picture a scar on the surface of skin that once bled freely, once required constant attention, once made you flinch if anything brushed against it. Years later, the scar is still visible. The story it tells is not erased. But you can press against it now without pain, run your fingers over it without wincing, because tissue does not stay open wounds forever. It closes, it hardens. It becomes simply part of the record of a life that kept moving forward, regardless of what tried to stop it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, near the end of his own reflections, that very little is needed to make a happy life, because it is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. He was not describing a man who had never suffered. He was describing a man who had suffered enormously. The deaths of children, the betrayal of trusted generals, the endless burden of a role he never wanted, and who had, slowly, deliberately, relocated the source of his peace from the events happening to him toward the mind interpreting those events. That relocation is available to you too. It always was. Here is what this looks like. Finally, in an ordinary future moment, someone asks about your past, curious, not unkind, simply making conversation. You mention what happened, the betrayal, the deception, the years it took to recover, and you notice, almost with surprise, that you can say it plainly, without your voice catching, without needing them to react a certain way, without needing the conversation to prove anything about your worth. It is simply something that happened. It is no longer something that is happening, not because it stopped mattering, but because it finally became something you carry instead of something that carries you. If you have stayed with me until this moment, then something in you already knows this was never really about the person who betrayed you. It was about the years you have spent, quietly, unknowingly, letting one moment from the past decide who you are allowed to become. They lied once. They deceived you once. The betrayal itself lasted seconds, minutes, maybe a single conversation that changed everything. Everything after that, the years of replaying, the walls built, the trust withheld from people who never earned your suspicion, the version of yourself shaped entirely around avoiding a repeat of that one wound. None of that was their doing anymore. That part was yours to write, and it still is. Marcus Aurelius asked himself the same question every morning of his reign, in 100 different forms. Will you be the man the world made you, or the man you choose to become despite it? The same question is waiting for you tonight. Not whether someone will ever betray you again. Someone eventually will, because that is the risk that comes with an open heart in an imperfect world. The real question is whether that future betrayal will find someone who has already handed their peace away, or someone who finally learned how to keep it. That is the only mastery that matters. Not becoming someone nobody can lie to, becoming someone whose peace no lie can reach. If this found you at the right moment, write one word in the comments: unshaken. Not to prove anything to anyone watching. As a quiet promise to the version of you that is finally done paying for a debt that was never yours to carry. This has been Stoic Journal. If this video spoke to something you have been carrying, the next one continues exactly where this leaves off, because the work of becoming unshaken is never finished in a single video. It is built one choice at a time, the same way it always has been. I will see you there.